So this is my first time doing one of these, especially in the car, and I really just wanted to talk about a quote. Not really a quote, but something that someone was talking about today that really piqued my interest, from Dr. Wayne Dyer. And he was saying that you cannot give out what you don't have. And a really good analogy that he used was when you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice. And he's saying, so for us as humans, as people, when we're squeezed, when we're under pressure, when we're under scrutiny, or when we're under having to take responsibility, what comes out of us? And what comes out of us is what we've been putting into ourselves. And so if you are someone who only feeds yourself anger, resentment, grief, judgment, sorrow, when you're in that position, what you're going to get out and what comes out to others is exactly those same emotions. And I, for some reason, all day today, that's just been on my mind because I think that's just really interesting. And that's an interesting analogy to use, like an orange, and I never thought of it that way. And I always knew that, like, you can only, how much you give yourself is what you give to others. But that feeling that, like, even in pressurized situations, even in relationships, the way you navigate that all depends on what you're giving to you. And so I have noticed that even in myself today, navigating situations, especially when I'm under a feeling of responsibility, I will sometimes meet that with aggression or with resentment or with a frustration, and I always wonder why that is. And I'm realizing ever since that quote that that's some of the things that I've grown to feed myself, and I have been doing that since I was a child. Growing up, those are the key emotions that I've fed myself and told myself those are the things that I can accept. And making that realization doesn't mean you're ever stuck either. And I noticed that today, in the same day, I went out and kind of just sat at a cafe in this museum, and I really enjoyed myself. Like, I loved going there. I love just sitting. I love just being in the space of art and creation. And I noticed my next interaction with my partner, I was able to be more filled with that same joy. I was able to reciprocate and give out and meet that conversation with that same joy, with that same love, with that same playfulness that I felt that I was giving myself while being at that cafe. And I think that we aren't really always taught that in a really realistic way. I think we're taught that in a circumstantial way, that if we don't take care of ourselves, that we'll wear ourselves out, that bad things will happen, that this and that. But what if you just loved yourself because you wanted to love yourself, and that you saw yourself and accepted yourself as your own responsibility, without guilt, without judgment, and then met yourself there, and in a practical way, not even in a philosophical way, but in a real way. You did practical, small things in your day that helped fill yourself up with joy and with love, to be able to then move to the next day, to the next step, to the next minute with that same joy and that same love. And so, yeah, I thought that was really a really good message. And that's something that just, like, was on my mind all day. And I think that applies to everybody, regardless of whether you are navigating situations, whether you're on your own and always navigating the situation of the relationship to yourself. So I guess if you feel like you're somebody who, well, I guess first see how the ways in which that you are reacting to certain situations, is that aligned with you? Are you asking yourself sometimes, okay, like why is that coming up? Why am I so angry in this situation? Why am I so frustrated? Why am I reacting that way? And know that, like, when we turn the inner eye, that's exactly how we're dealing with ourselves. That's exactly the way that we're holding ourselves. That's exactly the way that we're talking to ourselves, whether we know it or not, in a subconscious way or a conscious way. And that's the start, I think. That's the start of you wanting to make it different. If you saying to yourself, okay, I see that now, okay, if I wanted to replace this, what do I replace it with? Like, could I replace this with just, like, what would that replacement be, you know? And it doesn't have to be big. It can be really, really, really small. Like how I just did today, which is just going out and doing something that, like, you really just, like, love. Whether that's just not even playing the piano fully, but just sitting at the piano. Whether that's, like, maybe you can't make it all the way out to go to your favorite movie or to your favorite theater. Maybe you can just step outside the door for a second. Maybe your favorite park is getting renovated, but at least you can meet yourself halfway in certain situations and can still provide that amount of joy for yourself. so I asked us to challenge it. Like, what's next then? What do we do next? Do we challenge that inner belief of everything that we've been feeding ourselves and believe that anyways? Believe the image that we're seeing anyways, and allow that to be the inspiring thought that we continuously pour into ourselves that helps our inner self change into belief? Or do we work the other way of, okay, I know what I'm feeding myself is non-belief, what I'm feeding myself is inner doubt, and so how can I now, taking responsibility for that, help put into my space joy and love and acceptance, and I am good enough, and I am here enough to where you eventually get to that place of, okay, now I'm in that spot of believing that image that I've always seen is true and it is guaranteed to me. And I find myself in that spot a lot where I know I've seen visions of myself be a certain way, and sometimes it's hard for me to accept that person is real, or that I am always working towards actually getting there, or the steps that I'm taking are actually getting there. And that comes from my inner feeding of myself for the whole 27 years of my life, feeding myself self-doubt, and feeding myself you're not good enough, and feeding myself who are you? You don't know who you are. And so yeah, I feel like those two just go together so well. And I think it's never too late to be able to have that inner reflection and ask yourself, where do I want to start? Where do I want to start in taking that next step and figuring out, how do I just start believing in myself? And how do I start feeding myself things that help me believe in that self, that help me believe in me, that help me turn around the definitions and beliefs that I've held about myself. And I think a lot that can be a really big topic for creatives. I mean, just speaking for myself, I feel like that's something that I struggle with a lot, and that doubt makes me just not even take the first steps, because I've already made it up in my mind that these things could never work, or that any of these things that I've been guided to do, why am I even doing them if I already know it's not going to be the thing, if I already know it's not going to work. And really does come down to what are you feeding yourself? Like, what are those ideals that you're feeding yourself? And how do you want to change that? It's like diet, it's like eating. If you know that there are food groups or foods that you're constantly eating that aren't necessarily always for your best good, how do you, because I don't believe in cutting everything off cold turkey. I don't believe that, because your body has grown used to that food. And so how can you help hold yourself through, okay, let's make this change step by step, slow, and what does that look like? And how do we hold ourselves accountable when we do start to change? I think I'm someone who can struggle in that area sometimes of like, okay, how do I hold myself accountable to this change? I know I want to change, but how do I hold myself accountable to it? And I'm learning that coming from being an avoidant through my own childhood trauma, that a lot of that assistance can come from other people, and that's justified. It's okay to lean on other people. I or I was on a walk and I got this message too, that it's okay to lean on God. It's okay to lean on source. It's okay to lean on the universe and know that you don't have to bear everything yourself. You don't have to hold all of it. It doesn't always have to be all up onto you. You can totally just like ask for that help and know that you can trust that, because they also all have the best intentions in mind for you. But yeah, we're all just oranges. We're all just oranges, and we figure out what we're made of when we're squeezed. And that's not set in stone. We can change that. We can change the ways. We can change what comes out of us in the day-to-day way. And it just starts slow. It just starts by giving yourself little tiny things, whether that's affirmations, whether that's sitting with yourself through meditation, whether that's getting your favorite book actually, whether that's giving yourself your favorite new pair of socks. Something that tells yourself, hey, like, I am worth it, and I'm gonna start feeding myself these emotions that make me feel different about myself. And then that will just come out and reflect in the world. And that reflection in the world will be belief. Because you'll start believing in yourself. And that'll help you be able to believe in the world. So yeah, you're just an orange.